Peter, you're overthinking things. It's not that deep, they tell me. Peter, the game isn't political, they say. Peter, you're too beautiful and charming, they constantly tell me. I promise. Here's the thing. I do not possess the ability to turn my brain off and just play a game. I can't do it. I can't stop thinking. No matter if I'm playing a game or watching a movie or reading manga, I can't stop thinking about what it all means from a macro and a micro level. For example, I spent hours of my life picking apart the messaging and themes of Nier Automata, trying to understand what that game is saying and trying to tell me on a macro level about philosophy. Similarly, I've spent an equal amount of time thinking about the implications of the underwear in Baldur's Gate 3. It does not get any more micro than that. If you're interested, watch the video. Now, I don't mean to offend anyone when I say this, but that more analytical style of gaming seems to be kind of antithetical to the way that many people play games. A lot of people engage with the hobby at face value. They like the multiplayer in Call of Duty because the guns feel really good to shoot, or the story in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because the cast is charming and likable. But they don't look at it any deeper than that. And you know what? That's fine. That's a completely valid way to enjoy gaming. But I start to take an issue with that simplistic line of thinking anytime someone who plays games in that way tries to tell me that there's nothing more to what's going on with games than what's on the surface. Now, there will always be a subsect of people who misunderstand art and what the point of art actually is. But recently, I've seen an uptick in people like the ones I was just describing, expressing boldly that they missed the days when games weren't political. And I have a really hard time even knowing where to start with this one. So I guess I'll start here. All games have always been political, and no, I'm not looking too deep into it. Welcome back to Gaming Lit 101. Sounds like some people out there need to hear this. Sweet Baby Inc. controls major game studios. All games are woke now. Keep politics out of gaming, they comment under well-researched articles about very standard writing practices in game development. All right, so I'm going to try my best to not be a dick about all of this, but conversations surrounding politics in video games are a little challenging for two reasons, thanks to the types of people who seemingly want to have these sorts of conversations. The first is that most dissenting voices that I've encountered aren't making their comments in good faith. They're racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic bigots, and they know that. They take glee in knowing that they're allowed to be on platforms like Twitter because the owner of Twitter allegedly agrees with them, and they'll never have their accounts restricted as a result. The second part of what makes this conversation difficult is that these sorts of people don't actually want to have a real conversation about this sort of stuff. When journalists like Ash Parrish ask the people harassing them for clarification on what the fuck they're actually mad about, they get blocked. There's no dialogue with someone who just wants to point at you and go, woke! So, even though many of these people are bad faith actors, I don't think that everyone who believes that all games are woke now are too far gone to have their minds changed. I have to believe that people can change. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath for that, but I still think it's worth challenging the ideas that these sorts of people are presenting because maybe, just maybe, someone might actually listen. So here goes. The big thing I want to address today is the idea of politics in games and the demands that people are making for more apolitical gaming content. I think what's tricky about broaching this particular conversation is that anyone calling for apolitical games is already coming at things with a clear misunderstanding of how political ideas work. What I mean by that is politics are everywhere. They're inescapable. Every thought that we have and action we do is carried out as a result of some sort of political ideology or morality or even policy. Because games are made by humans and all humans have political ideas baked into them, there's no way for a game to be made without some sort of political messaging. That's just how art is. Now, that's not to say that everything is overtly political, but it's in there. There are complicated ways to explain how political ideas influence us, but the easiest way that I've found to boil things down and understand the politics of something is to simply ask why someone does something. Here's a really clear example of what I mean. Why are you fighting giant bugs in Helldivers 2? There are a few reasons, but the most simple is because you've been enlisted to fight as a Helldiver by the government of Super Earth. Super Earth is a hyper-militaristic, fascist state. There's the politics for you. But you can break things down even further and ask, well, why is the Super Earth government fighting the Terminids? The reason provided in-game is that they're too dangerous to be kept alive as a species, and that they stand in the way of managed democracy. When you look at some of the illegal broadcasts that you're sent to destroy as missions in the game, however, you'll see that the bugs are a threat manufactured by Super Earth in order to acquire the oil that powers their spaceships. There are a lot of political layers to that. There are parallels to the manufactured threats that real-life governments create to justify wars for their own benefit, like with Iraq in 2003. There's the very obvious "it was for oil all along" narrative that's been revealed years after the start of wars, like with Iraq in 2003. And there's the misdirection of the public as a way of instilling unquestioning nationalism to avoid the masses asking questions about the war, like with Iraq in 2003. Weird, it seems like there are a lot of parallels to the 2003 invasion of Iraq in Helldivers 2. So many, in fact, that it seems like an intentional political allegory. So, you're watching this. You're smart. You already knew that Helldivers 2 is an extremely obvious satire of militarism, colonialism, fascism, and modern-day propaganda. I'd say that explaining the game's very clear message is a little bit of overkill. I mean, how could someone miss all this when playing? The game makes its satire abundantly clear. Well, people have, and claim that they would like this game to remain politically neutral. The response to that is just like, hey, too bad. It is political. But as I said before, the basis of that request is impossible, not just because Helldivers is an explicitly political game, but because there's no way to make anything without having some sort of political implication. Okay, man, I hear you saying, not everything's political. Where's the politics in children's shows like Bluey and Peppa Pig? All right, so this is just my opinion, but I don't think that media for children should have explicit political messaging. I don't want the Paw Patrol dogs to tell kids to vote Republican in every election, even though that's absolutely what cop dogs would want. But most children's shows are meant to teach kids lessons. Usually it's simple stuff like, isn't sharing good? But when you boil political ideology down to its base components, you'll see that the morality of policies can be found in the same moral lessons that are meant for children, meaning that yes, even children's media is full of those woke politics that everyone's so afraid of. What I mean is, teaching a kid that sharing is good also plants the seeds of the idea that wealth distribution is good. Obviously, that political idea is a lot more complicated, but the basic principle of making sure that everyone has enough to be happy is the same. Storytelling is built on the idea that we're meant to learn things from characters, and learning lessons, even at the most basic, fundamental level, teaches us political ideas. So to ask video games to not be political is just impossible. Now, that should be it, right? Asked and answered. You can't make apolitical art because that's just not how art works. That's the answer to the pleas from Twitter users with anime profile pics, begging for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League to just drop the woke. But unfortunately, that can't be the end of the conversation, because those sorts of people don't actually want apolitical games. Their definitions of politics don't actually have anything to do with the political messaging of most games. Instead, what they're really crying out for is to cleanse gaming of those pesky minorities, gay people, black people, trans people, non-eye candy women. Remember when they yassified Aloy? Fuck. The reason why most conversations about politics in gaming feel so futile is because I'm talking about real politics, while the other side isn't. The Last of Us Part 2 is an extremely political game that serves as an allegory for the conflict in Gaza between the IDF and Hamas. Watch the fucking video. It's drenched in political subtext that's prime for interpretation and discussion. So why is it that 99% of every online conversation about the political agenda of The Last of Us doesn't mention Hamas or the IDF? Instead, these conversations are focused on Ellie's sexuality as a lesbian, Lev's identity as a trans man, and Abby's identity as a muscled-up badass Joel killer. What do all of those things have in common? Oh, that's right. They're things that bigoted losers don't want to see in their video games. So this is where the gloves kind of have to come off. People looking for the separation of politics and gaming don't actually want that, and don't have any interest in understanding why that literally can't happen. They want to live in a world where they don't have to face reality, and there's nothing anyone can say to that other than, what are you, 12? Too fucking bad. There's only so many times that we can explain the overlap of politics and gaming to these people for them to just not give a shit. I wrote that section about Helldivers 2 last week, and then this weekend, the Gamergate 2 Squeakquel mob jumped on the game when they were getting blocked by community mods for their hate speech. They were so shocked. It was really funny hearing them try and say that they thought the game was trying to laud itself as this bastion of apolitical gaming when it's very much not that. Remember Iraq? Anyway, this prompted a lot of smart and sexy people to try and explain the politics of Helldivers 2 to the GG2 mob, explaining that its messaging isn't subtle and is, in fact, one of the driving themes of the game. Paul Tassi from Forbes wrote an article titled, "Helldivers 2's politics appear to be flying over the heads of some." After sharing it to Twitter, Tassi took note of a common theme in the comments under his article. He wrote, "Check the comments here finally, and it's all, we know it's political satire. We just like that it's not rubbing woke politics in our faces." I think that observation tells us everything we need to know about the types of people calling for apolitical games. It's not about politics for them. Not really. It's actually about making sure that they keep anything woke out of their games, so just anything that's not straight white dudes and women in battle-ready bikinis. And it's interesting, you know? I remember being a little baffled about the response back in 2019 when Call of Duty devs said in a video interview with Game Informer that the Modern Warfare reboot was apolitical.
Is this game political?
No.
Really?
No.
Really?
We're just making games.
That seems insane.
It seems insane to get political to me.
Obviously, that's not true. We know that all art is political. We've been over that. But a game specifically about modern conflict is absolutely going to be political. Despite the fact that the developers were outright saying that the game is apolitical, though, it was never really pushed by the GG crowd as a pillar of apolitical gaming. We know, obviously, that the crowd looking for apolitical games isn't looking for that. Instead, they want non-woke games, which is kind of Call of Duty's whole thing, though, right? The series' conservative politics are essentially every right-winger's fantasy about how cool guns and the people who shoot them are, so the anti-woke crowd should love it, right? They don't. I mean, they play it, obviously, everyone plays Call of Duty, but there's no end to the number of videos on YouTube, like and subscribe, about how Activision went woke in the game series about killing brown people on foreign soil. What I'm saying here is that there's no pleasing these people, no matter what any developer says or does. Companies like Ubisoft that actively make games set in highly political settings like revolutions or a second American Civil War tells the public that there's absolutely no politics in them, despite being, more often than not, super conservative leaning. But they still get called woke, so why not just fucking own it? There's no pleasing gamergators. Sorry, that's the anti-woke crowd, not alligators who play video games. Because they don't stand for anything. All they care about is being mad over things that most people are completely unbothered by. There's a pride flag mural on one of the buildings in Spider-Man 2. Did you know that? I'm sure I saw it when I played the game, and I'm sure I thought it was cool, but like, I don't have anything to say about it other than, nice. Gay people. But there are hundreds of videos about the woke politics of Spider-Man 2. The final piece of this puzzle are the grifters, the people making those videos and raking in thousands of views for just looking into a camera and saying, "What's up everyone, it's Peter here, this is woke garbage." My hot take here is that I don't even think most of these anti-woke influencers actually feel all that strongly about wokeness, but they know that there's a huge audience of people who do, who they can make a lot of money off of. If you watch content like that and you're watching me right now, know that these people do not respect you. At the end of every single one of these low-effort, rage-bait videos is a plug for how you can financially support them. They know that you will throw money at anyone who points a finger and says woke, and they will do it for as long as they possibly can, regardless of if they actually believe what they're saying or not, because who cares? It makes them rich. Disgraced ex-game dev Mark Kern has been harassing women in gaming relentlessly, trying to get them to leave the industry, sicking the anti-woke mob on them. But you know what he's allegedly trying to get out of Gamergaters? Money. Money that's allegedly for a video game that he's supposedly been working on since 2019. You can spend hundreds of dollars on this allegedly non-existent game to pay for his 3-month-long vacations. That's what your anti-woke rage gets you. Negative $1,500 for nothing. Because guess what? They're not going to stop putting black people and gay people and trans people in video games. They're just not. The Gamergate mindset will die out because it's fucking pathetic, and everyone outside of the vocal Gamergate minority thinks so and laughs at it. It is a mindset built on hatred and delusion that once someone gains an ounce of empathy or intelligence is discarded. Why are you buying skin packs for a shitty looking mech game that does not even exist when you could play a very good, very real mech game made by FromSoft, one of the best studios on the planet? Oh, right, because it's woke, apparently, for having a super special strong woman living in your head? Doesn't that sound pretty good, though? So how do I even begin to wrap this up? Honestly, talking about this makes me feel a little hopeless at times. Over the past few weeks, I've witnessed a mob of people harassing excellent companies like NNE Saga and Black Girl Gamers and spectacular journalists like Alyssa Mercante, Ash Parrish, and Gita Jackson, all in the name of stomping the woke out of gaming and making apolitical video games. And the tough thing is, I'm not really sure what we're even supposed to do about it. Yes, I do believe that this sort of thinking will eventually die off, but eventually can last for decades, and I'm not cool with just sitting around until then. To try and speed up the process, I believe that there are a few things that we should do. The first is to recognize and internalize that the call for apolitical gaming is a facade. It's a mask to hide the bigotry that these people believe in, a way for them to justify demonizing anyone who represents progress. With that understanding, we then need to understand that there's no amount of facts or debating that can be done to prove these people wrong because they don't care. That's something I've struggled to understand, to be entirely honest, because I care about facts and reason and about other people. So talking with someone who doesn't care about those sorts of things and is willfully ignorant is really challenging for me. Once we understand that, though, I'm a little torn on what we can do. How do you educate someone who doesn't want to be educated? One idea is to just ignore these people and pray they go away, but what are you going to do until then? And how can you just ignore bigotry when it's being shot into your phone screen? And what do you do if you become the next person targeted by their harassment campaign? How can you just ignore that? In my opinion, ignoring this sort of thing doesn't really work. So we have to just fucking annihilate these people online. Alyssa Mercante is probably the most savage human being I've ever seen. I say that as a major compliment. I do not know why anyone would ever step up to her the way they do. When she responds to harassment, the person usually deletes their tweet because she embarrasses them so bad that they had to pack up and go home. It's astounding. There are two reasons why this sort of thing works so well. The first is because, as I said, if you speak a language that they understand, being demolished online, they'll run and hide, since most of these people actually aren't very clever or smooth. The second reason is because most people crumble to pieces as soon as they, specifically, are called out of a crowd. In regards to quote tweeting and responding to hateful stuff like this, Gita Jackson says, "I elevate the worst shit because I don't believe that the people sending harassing messages to my friends should be able to do so without being challenged whatsoever. And because I am not sure if people are aware of exactly how bad it can get. Arguing with these people does nothing. No one needs to argue with them. But also, people who call my friends racial slurs because of a differing opinion in video games have the luxury of being a part of a crowd, and they should not be afforded it. Day in, day out, it's having to stick your face in a bucket of racial slurs that gets to you. Over time, it wears you down, which is the goal. Why should anyone just ignore that? Be brave. Push back, challenge their ideas. Your voice matters here, especially if you're the kind of person who looks like them. There is no apolitical gaming, and what's ironic is that the crowd asking for it makes that abundantly clear. They're the villains in Wolfenstein, a reference they probably won't get because they didn't understand the game. Every game is political if you think about it long enough, and all games are apolitical if you never start thinking in the first place. Like and subscribe. Class dismissed.